Hello everyone, welcome to Victory Designer. Welcome to a continuation of our class on web development. Today we're going to be discussing the topic Introduction to Loops in JavaScript. Introduction to Loops in JavaScript. Loops actually is a very important and significant concept in programming that allows you to execute a block of code multiple times without having to write the same code repeatedly. So this particular class is going to be a very helpful class because you are going to gain solid understanding about the different types of loop in JavaScript, how they work, and when to use each type effectively. So guys, let's all dive in as we explore this topic called loops. So before going forward, guys, before we dive in, let's briefly revisit conditional statement because conditional statements actually used with loops. They go hand in hand. So let's do a quick recap about what they are all about. So now guys, in our previous class, we said that conditional statements such as if, and else allows you to control the flow of your program based on some certain conditions, right? Of which you have the if statement which executes the code if the condition is true, and then we have the else if statement which checks additional conditions. That is, if you have more than one condition on your code, the else if helps to check those other ones if they are false, right? And then we have the else statement which executes any condition that is false. Okay, so guys, going forward, we have the first type of loop, of which the first type of is called what? The for loop. So this class is just going to be a brief introduction about what loops are all about. I'm not going to do much coding in this class, but I want to just give you guys a glimpse as such about what loops are all about. So we have different kinds of loop, of which the first kind of loop we have is what we call the for loops. Now, the for loops is one of the most commonly used loop structure in JavaScript. That is because it is useful when you want to know exactly how many times you want to execute a block of code. It is used, guys, it is useful when you want to know how many times you want to execute a block of code. That means if you want the code to execute 10 times, you make use of the for loop. That means you already have in your mind that you want that thing to execute 10 times, right? So therefore, you have to make use of the for loop. So this is an example of how it looks like, guys. You see it, guys. I think there was a particular class in a previous class that I made use of the for loop a couple of times. So this is us just trying to go a little bit in depth into what they are. So the first thing we have, right? Now looking at this is the syntax for a for loop, right? Now say for example, guys, to count from 1 to 0, you would use the for loop because you already have in mind you want to count from 1 to 0. It is known to you that you want to count from 1 to 0. So therefore you have to make use of the for loop. Of which this guy from here, this is the syntax of a for loop. Now what does it mean? This first one, guys, this for is where you define and initialize your loop variable. Alright. First of all, you have to initialize your loop variable. That means you have to define a variable. Then the condition part is that it is it is used to evaluate your expression before each iteration is done on the loop. Alright. So if it evaluates to true, the loop continues. That means if you set I to be 1 and then you now say that if I is less than equal to 10, continue adding to it. That means if you have a variable called I and then you said that if the I is less than equal to 10, you should add 1 to it. So if that variable, let's say that variable is 12, it will add what? It will add, rather, if you have a if you say the variable is 10, it will not give you an answer because remember, guys, that I is less than equal to 10. So the maximum amount of value that I can be is what? Is 10. So if you have a value of say 12, it will not give you any, it will not iterate. But if the value, let's say the value is 2, I is equal to 2, and then we say that if I is less than 10, add 1 to it, that's iterate, add 1 to it. So therefore, if I is 2, so 2 plus 1 will not give us 3. That's how it will continue until it gets to 10, of which the maximum amount of it to get to is what? Is 10. So therefore it will stop iterating. That is what this code actually means. Alright. Now when should you make use of loop? When you can make use of loop, guys, if you want to know the exact number of iterations that you need. Just the way you have here, you want to count from 1 to 0. So if you know the exact number of iterations you need or that is required, you make use of the for loop. And also, if you are iterating over an array or a collection where you need to access the elements by their index, you make use of loops. And for last but not the least, if you want to clear, if you want a clear and concise way to manage your loop variable and its variables, you make use of the word the for. And then we also have what we call the while loops. The while loop now is useful when you don't know how many times you need to repeat a block of code. Remember, guys, that for loop is when you know how many times you want to repeat a block of code. And if you want to count something from 1 to 10, for example, you know that thing should iterate 10 times, right? But if you don't know how many times you want that block of code to iterate, you make use of the word the while loop. The while loop continues executing as long as that condition evaluates to true. So as long as that condition is true, it keeps on evaluating continuously forever and ever and ever. Alright? That is what the while loop does. But for the for loop, as far as the condition is met to a particular amount of time, it stops. But for the while loops, it continues over and over and over until that condition is no more met, until the condition is saying false, then it will stop. That is what a while loop does. Now, there are different ways to actually write a while loop, of which we have some example. Now, if you want to count from 1 to 10,000, you now say let x is equal to 1, while x is less than equal to 1,000. Console.log x, then iterate. Means that the variable now is x, is variable name x, of which you give it a value of 1, right? We now say that while now that means the maximum amount of x should be less than equal to 1,000. That means until it gets to 1,000, this thing should keep on iterating, should keep on adding one on top of it, adding one on top of it. Do you understand? Then in that sense that console.log, that means print out this x you have here. This x plus plus means one that add 1 to it, add 1 to x. If here is I plus plus means add 1 to I. If it is j that is here, j plus plus means add 1 to j. So since we have x, of which the variable we gave here is x, that means we give a variable name of x. So means that add 1 to x. So if as far as x is less than 1,000, add 1 to x, of which x is 1. So therefore it's now add 1 to x, that's 2. Now start counting from 2, 3, 4. So it keeps on executing. So when it adds 1 to x, of which x is 1, and then x now becomes 2, right? Now is 2 less than 1,000? Yes, it will now add down to 2 again. Now become 3. Is 3 less than 1,000? Yes, it will now add down to 3. Now become 4. Is 4 less than 1,000? Yes, that's true. Now add down to 4 to become 5. Now ask again, is 5 less than 1,000? Yes, 5 is less than 1,000. So therefore, it will now add 1 again to 5. That's why it continues until it gets to 1,000. That is why if you want to make use of while loops, they are great for places whereby you don't know the amount of times that code should run, but it should run until the condition is not met. Alright? That is what we make it of. So a few advantages of making use of while loop is that you can make use of it in places where the number of iteration isn't known beforehand. That means you don't know the amount of time you want that code to run. And also you want to also have more control over when the looping condition is checked. That means only until that thing is saying true, it will not run. If it's saying false, it will not run. It's only when it's saying true that it would actually run. So guys, apart from that, please be careful. Alright? Please be careful while making use of this while loop, because if your condition never becomes false, you create an infinite loop. Yes. And that infinite loop can actually crash your browser. So that is why you have to be very careful when making use of the while loop. Because this while loop, if you create a condition mistakenly that can never be false, it will end up crashing your browser or your program. So always ensure and make sure that there is a way for the condition to eventually evaluate as false. That means that is why imagine me now putting infinity here. Automatically I am crashing my browser. That is why I put 1000. That before it iterates to a whole 1000 to take a whole lot of time. But as far as it gets to 1000, it will stop evaluating, to stop iterating, and to stop the program. Do you understand, guys? So that is why that is a caution we should all be aware of. All right. And then we also have what we call the do while loop. Now this is not popularly used so much, but it's advisable that you have an idea of what it is. Now the do while loop is a type of loop that ensures that your block of code runs at least once before checking the condition at the end of each iteration. What does this mean? It means that before it starts running, it must run once before it starts running. Unlike the for loop whereby it will start running immediately until it gets to 10 in this example. Same thing with this while loop, it will start running until it gets to 1000. But for the do while loop, it will run at least once before it will even check the condition. Meaning that now let's say for example we have let y is equals to 1. Then we say do console y plus then while y is less than 10. In the sense that once you put this code into your browser, it does not care. It will first of all give you y plus 1, that's 2. It will first of all give you 2. Then it will now check and compare, okay, good, now I have 2. Is 2 now greater than, is 2 less than 10? Yes, it's now before it now start executing your what? Your loop. It must run once before it will now go and check the condition and then start executing your loop. You get, guys? That is what the do while loop actually does. And it is used when you want to ensure that your code runs at least once, regardless of whether the condition is true or false at first. You get? And also it is also used when you are prompting your users for input and you want them to see at least one prompt before checking their response. You get? So let's say for example now someone log into your web page, right? Now even if they are not now, okay, sorry, I recap. Let's say for example someone comes into your web page, they are not logged in, they have not signed up, they have not logged in, and you don't want them to see everything. You only want them to see a particular thing only when they are logged in, right? Now, as a user comes into your web page, you want to display some part of that information. That in the sense that even if they are logged in or they have signed up or not, everyone will see that information. Then after they then log in or sign up, then they will then see the remaining information. That is when we make use of do while loop. So it's as if you are trying to display half of the information or half of the content to everyone and anyone at the start. Then if they now miss the remaining condition, which is if they have logged in or they have signed up, then they can then view the remaining content or information. Do you understand, guys? That is also a very practical, a real life practical example of when to make use of the do while loops. Alright, so we have a few best practices for making use of. Now when working with loops, guys, number one is that you should avoid infinite loops. That means always make sure, guys, always ensure that your loop has a clear exit condition, right? Make sure that it has a clear exit condition. If not, you are going to crash your browser or crash your program, and that will lead to a lot of problems for you. Alright? And number two is that keep it simple, meaning that you should write clear, concise, and clean code. If your code gets too complicated, it can end up giving you errors, right? And developing so much bugs that it will take it so much time to actually debug. So it's best to just keep it as simple as possible. Also, optimize your performance and be mindful of your iteration count. That means if you're counting 1 1, good. If you're counting 2 2, go 2, but don't count something that don't go and use like you should be counting 10 10 or 20 20. That is actually wrong. Alright? And that's one of the basics to use descriptive variable names. So guys, these are just the few best practices for you making use of loop in web development. So we've actually covered a whole lot. This is just a would I say an intro class to looping. In our next class, we're going to go in deeper into the different kinds of loop that we have. We're going to go deeper into the for loop and the what and the while loop, and as well as the do while loop. Okay, so guys, I hope to see you in my next class. In case you find this video very helpful, do well to press the subscribe button and to like this video. And in case you have any questions as regarding this class or any class that we have had ever since, do well to leave them in the comment section, and I will try as much as possible to answer them all as soon as possible. So do have a wonderful day, guys, and I will see you in the next class. Happy coding.